I don't think people realize how close they are to literally the life that they want to live at any given moment in time. The first investments that they ever need to make in themselves are in themselves. Their personal education, who they're surrounding themselves with, who are you learning from, who are you modeling. We've never lived in a moment in time where there's so much information available to everyone. Do this if it's important to you, because everything's at your fingertips. You don't need to spend a fortune.
What I know about you is exactly what you just said. You're not someone who just like read a book or went to college or sat in a classroom and like learned some shit. Like you walk what you preach, and I've seen that in person. And I think one of my favorite things about you is you're just like no bullshit, straight shooter. You don't really fuck around, and you really care about other people. Like you really want to help other people win. And I've seen that multiple times. And so anyway, yeah, it's just some stuff that I want to dig into. So let's start with this right here. You're a smart guy. You've got a great background. You've done a lot of things. Why do you choose this field? Like, what is it about helping people with their wealth and that freedom that you talked about that is why do you choose to do that?
Just because I think I've done it wrong for so long. I did it wrong for so long. Like, I mean, if you want to go way back in time, I grew up without a father. My dad left when I was real young, 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that. I never talked to him again. That was really impactful on my life, right? So, like, I grew up wrong side of the law, wrong side of the fights, wrong side of the substance abuse, whatever. Like, you want to, all that story, whatever. We don't need to get into the origin story. I was a rough kid. So being a parent is important to me, right? I always knew it was going to be important to me. I wanted to be a dad. Like that was really pivotal in what I wanted to create in my life. I knew that was something that I aspired to do, along with all this other stuff, right? Like I went into special operations, did all this, like looked for accolades, tried to accumulate a bunch of wealth. But at the end of the day, I knew I wanted to be a dad. And ultimately, I was doing it kind of wrong because I didn't have any great models, right? I never saw like a good marriage. I never saw like a good dad, and I never saw really anybody making money. I mean, like that wasn't in my scope when I was growing up. So I sought out other people, other models, and things like that. I just knew like my path wasn't working. And when you talk about me pouring into other people authentically, like it's truly important to me because like I'm out there. I like to say I'm out there getting my ass kicked with everybody else, and I'm just a little further along, like in most cases. But also, like the reason that I can like teach and come from a place of like zero judgment is because I've made all the mistakes. Like I tried to say that I was doing all this stuff for my family. I was working really hard for my family. I was working really long hours for my family. I was trying to accumulate this wealth. I was taking risks for my family. But at the end of the day, like I was on a path to kind of blow it all up because like I'm a person that kind of chases chaos. Like that's always been my fucking MO. And good or bad, it's kind of the hand that I've usually dealt myself. So that's been a lot of personal internal work to figure that out on how to like not like self-sabotage everything you're trying to build. And so and I see men do this constantly, and I'm not like a men's therapist. I'm just a fucking man. And like I like to think that the message that I put out there resonates with a lot of guys because they're like, yeah, I'm a dumb shit too. But I do have a heart. I do care for my kids. I do wish I could spend more time with them. But I also do get frustrated with them. I don't know necessarily how to empathize with my wife or my kids, or like working is what I knew. So working is what I leaned on because like I can outwork, quote unquote, outwork anyone, right? But I didn't like that mentality either. Like the grind mentality is like bullshit. And so because it's all fake. You're really like just compensating for something else. If you're working 20 hours a day, give me a fucking break. You're not working for 20 hours a day. You're just an inefficient business owner. Like at the end of the day, like you're just not very talented at what you're doing. So like I would argue with most people that come at it from that angle because I was that person in my late 20s, early 30s that like I didn't know really how to be a husband. I didn't know how to be a father. I had these young kids, and like I leaned on work. So I went to work because it was natural for me. I knew it, it was comfortable. Everything else was super uncomfortable. Everything else was super chaotic. My wife like needed me in a way that I was just like, I don't know about that. So like I've been through all these trials and tribulations, and then at the end of the day, it really just came back to me telling myself stories of like, hey, I'm building this fucking stuff for us. But at the end of the day, it was obvious the trajectory I was on was going to be something that I ended up at the end of the day, just me alone holding the bag, or maybe not even holding the bag. And, just in a lonely situation. And so I really had to go back and do a lot of introspection on myself to determine like, I'm saying all these things, right? They're all the right things. And they all were true. Like they were true, but my actions didn't support what I was actually trying to do because I was not necessarily endearing myself to the people around me long term. And so when you talk about being in special operations and gone through the things that we've gone through and seen what we've seen and done all those things, like there's a mortality to it that makes you question and really put an emphasis on time, right? And presence and things like that. So presence is something that I work on all the time, but like I also have a really innate understanding to the fact that my kids are 5, 7, 10, and 12, and they'll never be 5, 7, 10, and 12 again, ever. And so like I want that 5-year old experience with my 5-year old right now. I don't want to wait until I'm 62 because I can make millions of dollars and like they may or may not talk to me at that point, right? Like if I run the table and I say just wait 15 years for me to come back home and I'll bring you everything you've ever wanted, and all they really wanted was just me to pay attention to them, like you can't get that stuff back. And so long story short, but I mean I've spent the last really 10 years, but specifically really 5 tuning in, like really, really getting. I think 10 years ago, I didn't really, I knew that I was on the wrong path, but I was trying to figure it out. And I had the recognition that what I was doing was not going to work long term. So, like, I needed to figure this shit out. And then, like, slowly but surely, I've started to dial everything in, and I feel really good about where I'm at now. Because I mean, I say to everybody, like, the money's the easiest part. It really is truly the easiest part. All the rest of the stuff and fixing all of your own shit, and then like having a great family and being present for them, raising your kids right, like that's truly your legacy, right? The money can be made at any point in time, but like I said, you can't get these particular days back in the future, and they'll never repeat themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're really hitting on something that's super important. So for people who are listening, the psychology of the whole thing is massively important, right? Like, because you and I have, I didn't know this until just now, but you and I have a very similar background, right? No father in the home, chaotic upbringing. I grew up in some of the worst neighborhoods in some of the worst cities in America at the time, and I did all the shit. I got into all the trouble you couldn't do. You know, there's some people who are really patriotic and they sign up for the military because, you know, they want to go fight for their country, and they, you know, like 9/11 happened, everyone signed up. I'm the other story, right? Like I was a complete fuck up. I had nothing else going on, and I just kind of ended up in the Rangers by the grace of God, right?
Yep.
But anyway, the point of that whole thing is that I've seen so many guys like you and me fuck it up by creating an identity. And the words you said were perfect, right? I'm gonna outwork everybody, right? Like I'm gonna create my identity in being the workhorse, or the one who the martyr, right? Like the one who just suffers more than anybody else, and that's gonna be my identity, you know. But I've also seen, and you mentioned it, and there's a lot of successful people out there who figured this piece out, is like, can you harness the chaos, right? Like there is a bit of chaos that comes with success and the stuff we're going to dive into, but the psychology of the whole thing, and not creating an identity around you know, breaking your back or whatever else, or running from your family because you don't know how to deal with them, You know, there's a major aspect of that. I'm curious, how did you come to that piece? I mean, we're going to get into the other tactical shit. Like you
Yeah.
said, the money naturally flows to you and everything, but was there a moment in your life that like you kind of like came to this realization, like I need to get my shit together?
Yeah, it was probably about 6 years ago. I mean, that was the real ultimatum. I think our marriage was kind of a mess. I mean, my wife wrote a book about it called "The Confessions of an Unhappy Housewife." It was a bestseller.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, I need to pick
yeah,
this up. That's awesome.
yeah, for sure. And it resonates with a lot of women because it was about her journey of kind of losing herself and having been a high achiever coming into our relationship, and then being strapped with 4 young kids very quickly and like losing her identity. And what happened is we grew apart in our marriage, and then like we just had like some real tough conversations about like what was going to happen, and we both chose to stick it out and figure it out. And ultimately that's kind of where the rubber met the road on like what has to change, because I needed to go a different direction or I was going to be without my wife and kids ultimately.
Yeah. That's
And
badass. I mean, that's awesome. That I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is where a lot when it really does. I don't care who you are, and you know, you can be the smartest, most talented, most educated person, but it does take other people around you. You know, they say we're the sum of the people in our lives, and
sure.
I think that's badass that you had a wife who was willing to kind of go through that, have that level of communication, and ultimately, I'm sure that's a large part of why you're sitting here now on the other side of it, feeling pretty successful.
Well, I mean, oh yeah, ultimately, I mean, it was, there were some tough times for sure, but like when you really analyze, when I talk about not having models and things like that, when you perceive what a man is to be, and then you want to develop into a man that is a man of honor and a man of certain standards and things like that. I've done a ton of like stoicism and education on the practitioners of stoicism and things like that, and ultimately like I would not have been the man I am if I said that I wasn't willing to like change and alter my personal egotistical direction to fit my family in, because they were what was important to me, and I just needed a mindset shift on like what that needed to look like. And I couldn't really conceptualize it until I opened up to like shedding my ego about what I thought I needed to be or whatever, right? and
Yeah.
and part of it was just admitting that like I made a bunch of business mistakes, I made a bunch of financial mistakes, I didn't know what I was doing in a lot of the things that I took on, which is just fucking natural, right? You don't know what you're doing. It's like having kids or getting married. You don't know what you're doing until you get into it and then start figuring it out, right? And for me, there was a lot of ego wrapped up in like business and things like that, and I was able to like admit some of those shortcomings, but like the reality of it was I had to like bear myself raw to like all the mistakes I had made along the way in all these different aspects, whether it was my relationship, whether it was being a father, whether it was business, and like what I didn't know I needed to shore up and build skill sets around, and then also develop my EQ versus IQ and things like that, right? And
Hmm.
so
I think that that tolerance of failure is really important. I think that that's where a lot of people don't make it through. It's not that they didn't have the ability or that they weren't going to, but you bump up against enough failure, and it hurts the, you know, it hurts the confidence, it hurts the ego a little bit, and most people just say, you know, fuck it, I'm gonna go do something else. And I think those that like yourself that have kind of figured it out, you have to have that. You have to build up some resilience. In fact, I saw on your Instagram the other day something that really touched me. Was something about resilience. You know, do you remember what you said? I'm trying to remember what it was, but I remember being struck by it. You were out walking and talking to
yeah.
your phone.
Yeah, Sean had just taught Sean Ryder had just taught a lesson to the group about resilience, and I can't remember specifically what I had said, but yeah, I remember that post definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, life is just about setbacks, and you really have to understand that. And I say all the time, I mean, if nothing else came out of special operations ever, like the ability to train myself that I wasn't going to quit things is certainly what came out of that. And life is just a series of setbacks, because like I did an analogy the other day of baseball or something like that, like where you 3 out of 10 is Hall of Fame. And when you actually look at business and how you get your ego wrapped up in things, like even in investments, it doesn't need to be like, if you listen to Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, the biggest investors in the world, like they're steady Eddie, but they will tell you as to a man that it only takes one. It only takes one swing of the bat that to finish you if it's the right thing. And so like you have to keep swinging. And
Yeah.
and I think that, like, honestly, being a spouse of someone that's a risk taker like that or an investor like that is hard, because you see them strike out a bunch and you're like, holy shit, man. Like, and not that I had a ton, I haven't had bad deals. I've had a couple things I've been stuck in, but like for the most part, they've been good for the most part, not home runs. Some have been home runs, but like in the investing world, you try to hit singles over and over and over again, and then you look up and you've got scoreboards full of singles and you're good. And so you just try not to take any risks. You underwrite your deals well and things like that. But the ultimate thing is, like, you have to keep on getting out there and taking action. And you asked me why I created my group or why I do what I do. Like, I don't think people realize how close they are to literally the life that they want to live at any given moment in time. And because you're really only 2 to 5 years away from whatever you want to do in life, if you're willing to first of all lay it out and get clear on what it is that you want, and then stay focused on it for a period of time. And most people just can't focus on it. Most people can't reconcile in their heads that they could actually do that. But I mean, the fact is, the system is not broken as they say it is. Like, anybody could be retired in 5 years if they wanted to, like functionally retired, doing whatever they want to be doing. And they just have to get clear on it, and then choose their path that they're comfortable with, and then stay focused on it and keep on moving in that direction without deviation, and don't break the compounding effect.
Okay, so let's, because now I'm intrigued, right? Like, I want to dive into some of these tactics a little bit. So someone comes to you, and they're like, all right, I want to figure this out. I want in 2 to 5 years, I want to be in a much better place in terms of my wealth and freedom. What are some of the where are some of the ways that you guide them? What do you guide them into?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the first investments that they ever need to make in themselves are in themselves. Their personal education, who they're surrounding themselves with. You spoke about that. Who's in your circle? Who are you learning from? Who are you modeling? Right? Like, this can be as inexpensive an endeavor as you want it to be, or it can be almost free. We've never lived in a moment in time where there's so much information available to everyone. That's why, like, really, I'm just the hammer to pound it into your fucking head that, like, do this if it's important to you, because everything's at your fingertips. You don't need to spend a fortune. Like, I've spent probably $1 million on personal development in 15 years, but you don't have to do that at all. What that does for me is compresses time and gives me exponential return on investment. I know that because I've practiced it. If you're not there, read a book, buy a book, watch a YouTube video. I don't even understand how people aren't able to go out and just teach themselves something in 4 hours or 40 hours of YouTube learning, and go pick up a skill and a gig that you could make a couple extra $1,000 a month, like, very easily. Now, if you own a business already and that can become a distraction, I understand that. But if you're a W-2 person, you work 9 to 4 or 8 to 4, like, and you don't think you make enough money, Like there's an endless supply of money available for you if you're willing to spend your time outside of that 4 o'clock to midnight doing other things, learning, working on yourself. The great thing about doing that is no one can take that stuff away from you ever. The other thing about it is if you go read books, you go learn about things, my number one real estate book for everybody listening is The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. You need to read that very first. It teaches you a lot of different ways to invest in real estate, and it builds out different scenarios, and then you can decide which one may be palatable for you if you want to get into real estate. So it goes like 10 paid off houses versus 100 leveraged houses versus apartment complexes versus different asset classes and what you'll deal with in everything. So like it kind of measures your risk tolerance financially. It measures your like tolerance for actually working in the business, on the business, if you will, in the business. And so that's a great book to get started on. But also, I'm just an avid learner. I read like crazy because it's the cheapest way to get into something and evaluate whether you would like it or not. Because real estate's not for everybody. It's what I do, but it's not for everybody. And so like when you come into our group, what we do is a series of financial steps that you step through, and one of them, the fourth level, is investing in cash flow assets. And so you have to choose what assets are beneficial to you, and that's after you've invested in your primary business, if you have a primary business, to max out your profitability there. Because if you already own a business, your best investment is generally in the primary business that you're already pulling levers on, because you can throw $1 in there and kick 30 back out the back end in most cases, and you can't do that with other investments. Like you're not going to go buy a rental property and get that kind of ROI. Like, so you have a lot of control over a business you're already operating. So you've got to max out that first. And then you have to choose your asset class, whether you want to buy more businesses or a business or different businesses. That's great. We do recommend doing that. We guide people through that. We guide people through buying every different asset class of real estate. I mean, to the point where we even talk about dividend producing stocks. And like, that's okay if you want to do that, if you want to dabble in it. Most of our people don't. So we take it from investing, saving money, maximizing your profitability into infinite banking. We build you an infinite banking system, which is overfunded high early cash value life insurance. So they have 92% of their initial investment available there. That's earning 6.2% forever. The great thing about that process is that once you get that money in there, it's earning 6% forever, and there's zero interruptions to the compounding. So from the time you take that dollar in there and get it into your system, it never has any break in compounding until you die. And there's nothing else that really operates that way or is as protected as that either, because they've returned for 170 straight years. It's literally the best, safest investment you could possibly make.